Hello and welcome to That Shooting Show. My name's Steve Anderson. I am your humble host. As always, want to thank our partners first. You know them, you love them, say them with me. Walther Firearms is the title sponsor of the podcast and AndersonShooting.com. More specifically, the Walther PDP steel frame, which I did use to capture my very best ever turn and draw. I busted a .77 to steel at 7 yards, which beats my previous best of .79 by 2/100ths of a second. And I don't know how much credit you want to give the Walther for that, but I'll tell you this. I dry fired for about 10 minutes, warmed up a little bit, and was able to do that very quickly. Personal best, CR speed belt, CR speed hanger, all the usual stuff, Outdoor Dynamics ammo. Oh, I guess we're doing the sponsors anyway. Targets USA Steel, CR Speed holster gear, the AMG-lab.com from Anderson Tyler picked it all up. I was able to see it all using my Hunter's HD Gold spectacles, and OutdoorDynamics.net ammo made it happen. And of course, ShootingSportsInnovations.com provided the Cuda Lube. I treated that Walther steel frame to a very light bath of Cuda Lube and a light cleaning prior to that amazing shooting. If there's anything we can give the Walther credit for, the grip, because of the grip panels, is slightly rounder than that on the PDP, the standard PDP. And I'm telling you, it just feels like home. It's been a long time since I picked up a gun, and it felt like home. The new Walther PDP steel frame, you pick it up, it just feels like home. It has a very comforting weight. Everything about it is fantastic. I did speak to Chris from Walther about availability. He says they are shipping to distributors, but they're selling out as quick as they get there. That's the price you pay for having a phenomenal firearm. And of course, it does come with the Walther Day 30-day money-back guarantee on the old PDP. You're not going to use it on the steel frame. You won't even consider sending this thing back. If you like the weight of a CZ, this is very, very similar. Feels very, very close to that. I'm not sure what the scale would say, but it feels just like it. And I'm telling you, the slightly rounder grip surface, the grip texture is perfect. Everything about it is just phenomenal. Really, really nice gun. Check one out if you can find one. And if you're going to be in Lima, Ohio, well, there's 15 of you that are for sure going to be there. There is exactly one spot left for our class with Joey Sauerland in Lima, Ohio, February 24 and 25. As we've said before, I'll be handling mental management and match mode, accuracy, shot calling. You might as well call it accuracy at speed because that's better clickbait. I'll be handling accuracy at speed, which is what everybody really wants. We'll talk about how to do that. And Joey will be handling movement and overall increasement. Overall increasage. Overall getting faster. Joey has pioneered some things in dry fire that he uses to get really, really fast on a subconscious basis, and he's going to be helping you with that. Class will be split into two groups, so 8 of you will be with me on Saturday. 8 of you will be with Joey on Saturday, then we're going to swap you. Joey will also be covering physical fitness as it relates to shooting. He has promised to do the physical fitness portion later in the day, at the end of the day, and has promised that you won't be too wiped out to do anything the following day. Like any class, what you do after the class is going to be more important than what happens during the class. And speaking of classes, you can always go to upcoming classes on AndersonShooting.com to see where we're going to be and what we're going to be doing. And if you want a class in your area, you just reach out and let me know. Say, hey, I have access to a range. We have standard USPSA props. Come on to a class. And we can make that happen. Also, Joey and I have discussed the possibility of taking our class on the road. So if you want to see Joey and I do the 2-day extravaganza at your range in your area, you just let me know and we will work that out. It's a little tough scheduling classes with Joey because he's got to look at his calendar and he's got winning scheduled. So like he'll flip to a week. Oh, I'm winning here, winning here. I'll be winning this weekend. This weekend I'm not shooting, so I won't be winning. So I could be doing something over there. So we'll have to find a weekend where Joey is not winning something to take this thing on the road. But if you want to take this thing on the road and have it on your range, we can certainly arrange for that to happen on your range. All right, so we got a bunch of letters today, and we're going to get right to it. First one comes from a good buddy of mine, Billy. I've been working with Billy now for probably over a year, and he is one of the few people that has really, really begun to live mental management behind the gun. And there's a big difference between taking the class and thinking something magical is going to happen and really understanding the material and really using it. So let's see what he has to say. Subject line is, don't stop believing because it's been a journey. Hey, Steve, had my first overall match win today. I woke up this morning after yesterday's classifier match and said to myself, I will do very good today. After I read my directive affirmation taped to the bathroom mirror, I said to myself, I will win this match today. And I did. Now, we got to stop and talk about that for a minute. What he's talking about is an imprint to self-image that says, my normal performance will bring me a victory today. If you're middle of the pack, if you're bottom quarter of the pack, you won't be able to get up and say, I'm going to win this match today. That is a progression of self-image that happens over time. As you begin to employ a process-based performance, utilizing a subconscious stage plan and a singular focus, more on that later, self-image begins to be okay. And this is ironic because, and we have a letter about this in a minute, but in the beginning, self-image is a little weirded out by a better than normal finish, right? You always finish where you finish. You always do how you do. And if something happens that puts that above or below, self-image gets conflicted. And what Billy has done is Billy has been stretching his self-image to be okay with doing better and better and better, and eventually winning the whole shooting match. So, and we're going to talk more about that here in a minute. He continues, stage 3 was 2 strings of Virginia. There were 2 barrel stacks as vision barriers. Freestyle 1 round, reload, move to the other box, 1 round, strong hand only. Next string was same, but weak hand only. I wonder who won that stage overall. 12 drills of refinement and repetition, guy. That's who. And again, refinement and repetition, the first 12 drills of that book has made dozens, if not hundreds, of grandmasters. It will prepare you for any stage that is primarily standing and shooting. Well, it doesn't do anything for movement. Well, that's as they're written, they don't, but there's no reason that you can't add movement to those drills and make them movement drills. All you have to do is edit the stage description, the drill description to say, while moving. And you can turn them into movement drills very easy. And we usually do the 12 drills of Christmas every December, and I'm sure we'll do it again this year. But we'll talk more about how to change those into movement drills. But here we had strong hand only, weak hand only, and of course he won the stage because most people don't practice strong hand only, weak hand only. And those that do tend to win. Okay. Continuing on, stage 4 was Virginia, and a blend of Can You Count and El Prez. It was quite fun. String 1 was 5 rounds, T1, reload, 2 rounds, T2 through T4. String 2 was 5 rounds, T8, 2 rounds, T5 through T7. Overall stage win. Second place was 82% and some change. R&R again for the win with a .80 and a .77 first shot. Woo! Oh, the draw's not that important. You don't do that many of them. Well, the shorter the stage, the more important the draw. You know, classifiers, quote-unquote speed shoots. Anybody who's dry firing a snappy presentation is going to get a snappy presentation. Very nicely done. .8 and .77 is outstanding. Over the past 2 months, I've used mental management to talk into existence 2 100% classifiers in limited optics and 300% classifiers in carry optics. Then today, I talked into existence my first overall win. The power of mental management is so very real and demonstrable. Today, I found perfect. Thank you. Cannot wait till February. And of course, he's talking about our class with Joey Sauerland in Lima, Ohio, February 24 and 25. Exactly one spot remaining. All right, so the end of that is when he says talking to existence, what he's talking about is the principle of reinforcement. And the principle of reinforcement for mental management says that whatever you think about, talk about, write about becomes more likely to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that you can just sit there, cross your legs, hold your fingers up in a little Zen pose, and just think your way into winning. But if you're doing the work and you are not thinking your way into winning, you'll find it very difficult to do that. Again, self-image always gives you the performance you expect, not the performance that you want. And as skill increases, mental game increases, all of the mental management components work together. As your skill increases, your victories increase. It's very, very simple. Nicely done, Billy. Appreciate you. All right, second letter. I was curious if you had any other mental phrases you may have come across related to Steel Challenge or USPSA. I've come across these, but besides the one you always use, are there any other? Center the dot, call your shot, which is, of course, my favorite one. All gas, no brake. Or see the line, feel the stroke. All right, so what he's talking about is, on the podcast, we call it a focus phrase, and mental management, we call it a point of focus. And what you're doing is you're choosing one thing for your conscious mind to be occupied with so that it does not micromanage subconscious skill. All you're doing is giving your conscious mind something to do besides think and or participate in draw, reload, movement, entry, exit, shooting while moving, sweet Filipino kick out, whatever. All of these should be subconscious skills, which means if you think about them specifically, you're pretty likely to screw them up. The analogy I always use in the mental management classes is if you think about the girl in the scary movie who's trying to put her key in the lock, front door of the house or the car or whatever, she can't do it because the pressure of being chased by the killer is preventing her from getting access to that subconscious skill. She's put that key in that lock 100 times, and she can do it. She could be carrying a couple of sixers of Zima. She could have maybe a White Claw under her arm, and she could do it just fine subconsciously. But the pressure of the killer chasing her causes the subconscious skill of unlocking the door to become conscious. We call that conscious override. Conscious mind wakes up and goes, uh-oh, this is really important. I need to get involved. And choosing something to think about right before you shoot is designed to occupy the conscious mind so that it doesn't get involved in micromanaging subconscious skill. This will always provide a consciously overridden performance, which of course is the opposite or the antithesis, if you will, of a subconscious performance, which is kind of our new thing here at AndersonShooting.com. I shoot my best when I'm not thinking. I don't care. Well, that's great. How much thought have you given to replicating that environment when you are thinking and you do care? That's what mental management does. It takes the environment where you're not thinking and you don't care and replicates it when you are thinking and you do care. So, with regard to these things, what I'm going to tell you is, if you guys remember Here's a Matalia, remember the boss I had that would start every phrase with, Here's a Matalia. I mean, this guy was the blowhard of blowhards. He could stand at the back of the sailboat and take that sucker all the way to Antarctica with the power of his verbal platitudes. He would stand there with his cup of coffee and he'd wait for the tiniest little gap in the conversation and say, Here's a Matalia. And then he would tell you what he's going to tell you. So here's what I'm going to tell you about this. what you're doing again is you're occupying the conscious mind. And it doesn't matter a lot what you choose to think about. It only matters that you surrender to it fully without thinking about anything else. For example, I've told you this story numerous times. I had a client one time in New York. Some of you may recognize him when I do the voice. I'll do the voice, okay? So we were doing match mode coaching. He takes a mic on every stage. He comes to me and he says, "This is not working." And I say, "Okay, what's your final thought?" "Send to the doc, call the shot, but I want to go fast." And that's the problem. He's saying send to the doc, call the shot, but what he really wants to do is go fast. That's in parentheses. That's after a semicolon. And if there's anything in parenthesis or after a semicolon in that last final thought, you will get whatever's in the parenthesis or the semicolon. And there's a process involved, a journey, if you will, in learning to trust that. For example, in his case, he's saying send to the dot, call the shot, but he doesn't trust, know, accept, or believe it's going to provide acceptable speed. He knows it'll provide acceptable accuracy. What he doesn't know is it'll provide acceptable speed. And he hadn't reached a point where he trusted it to let the speed have. This guy was quick. He's a masterclass open shooter at that time. Very, very fast. And when you're fast, the last thing you need to do is hurry. I mean, if you're already quick, just be quick. You got the subconscious skill. Whenever somebody says, let it happen, or whenever somebody says, just do it, what they're really saying is allow your subconscious skill to shoot the stage. But again, people may not take that extra step, right? You might hear just do it, or just let it happen, or just let it flow. Well, if you're all wound up with pressure and anxiety, that's just going to make you mad. Do what? Do what? Let what flow? But if the stage plan is subconscious and you pick something for your conscious mind to do or think, then you get access to subconscious skill in accordance with your level of confidence. So let's go back to when you shoot your best. You shoot your best when you know the stage inside and out, you're not thinking a lot, and you're not worried about results. Okay? So we have a subconscious stage plan. We've talked about that a lot. We have a minimum of conscious thought, which is the whole point of the focus phrase, or the point of focus is to establish a minimum of conscious thought. And self-image either knows we're going to do okay or is not worried about the results, or something in that continuum somewhere. Right? And mental management is all about replicating those conditions when you are thinking and you do care. So regarding your possibilities here, all gas, no brake, man, that depends on what that means to you. All gas, no brake could do one of two things. If I'm prone to overconfirmation or undertrying, it could allow me to prevent overconfirmation or undertrying. But if I'm prone to rush, try, hurry, something like that might give me permission to do it. So I personally wouldn't use all gas, no brake when I'm shooting for score. See the line, feel the stroke. I mean, most of you are too young to know about Billy Squier and his famous classic rock song, "The Stroke." If I said see the line, feel the stroke, I'd have stroke me, stroke, down, 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 which may or may not be great. But again, it matters only what these things mean to you. And I prefer it to be something visual because for me personally, the visual component is the most important one. And when I say center the dot, call the shot, and I'm shooting a dot gun, and I'm shooting for score, what that means is that gun will not go off until the dot's in the middle of the target. And then I see it lift. That's strictly for shooting for score, right? Competition or doing something like that in training. Like, for example, when I did my award-winning world record .77 turn and draw to a steal at 7 yards, I did a bunch over the 90s. I probably had 6 or 7 in the 90s. I had an 84 in there, a bunch in the 90s, a lot of 90s. and I didn't need a whole lot of time. I was only trying to do a 78. And my 84, I think the 84 was a miss, but I didn't care because I was super happy. So as I was trying to do this, I was experimenting with a few different things. I noticed that if I tried to move my hands quicker, I would miss my grip. So I abandoned that pretty quickly. No need to move my hands quicker. And then I discovered that, or I realized that on my best ones were the ones where I really focused on snapping my head at the instant that I heard the timer. So I began to really think about snapping the head at the instant I heard the timer. Okay, and this was more of a feeling than it was a phrase. I didn't ever say snap the head or anything like that. I simply visualized it in slow motion. I had this mental recording of the start tone in slow motion, and I imagined having my head halfway around in the middle of the foghorn. See, when you take a slow motion video with a timer, start tone turns into a foghorn, so it goes. So what I did was, as I was reloading and preloading, and those are mental management terms we won't get into right now, but I'm visualized getting this right. Got my hands up, and I'm starting to turn my head just as soon as I hear that start tone. And thinking about that served as a point of focus for that activity. And what it did was it had everything about snapping the head the instant that I heard the start tone. Nothing about the feet, nothing about the hands, nothing about any of that. All that's 100% subconscious. I've been dry firing turn and draw for 20 years at a .6 part-time. 20 years. Man, if there's an example of subconscious skill, that's an example of subconscious skill. Oh, and on the topic of the turn and draw, I did discover, people have asked me this in the past when I demonstrated the turn and draw, I did discover that weighting my left foot was a little quicker. Or it might have just been an occupation for my conscious mind, not 100% sure. But my best runs did come when I put some extra weight on that left foot. Now, when you watch that video, you'll see that I don't rotate the left heel like I normally do, because it wasn't necessary for that. I've learned that bending the knees a little bit for the turn and draw makes it less necessary to kick out that heel. But this is not about the technical specifications of my moment of brilliance. This is about a point of focus. But what I did was I used the singular point of focus, the idea of beginning to turn my head as soon as I heard the start tone. That's what I was using for a point of focus for that particular deal. And it did a couple of things. It made me hyper aware of doing that thing, and it pushed everything else into the subconscious. So when you're looking for a focus phrase or a point of focus, you've got to ask yourself, what things are subconscious? Ideally, stage plan, technique, all the rest of it. Trigger control should be subconscious in there as well. I think that a visual component to the point of focus when you're shooting for score is the most important thing, because that's the area that people tend to lapse on. For example, Jay Beal, his point of focus is a grin. And what that means is, for him, it is 100% subconscious to have the dot in the middle of the target. He has figured something out. Now, this isn't in the owner's manual for every red dot, so a lot of people don't know this, but he has figured out through trial and error that if the dot isn't on the target, it's not likely to produce a hit when the gun goes off. I know. It's high-level information for sure, but he's figured that out. So for him, that means having the dot where he wants the bullet to go is subconscious. So the grin does a couple of things. It occupies the conscious mind, cleans it out, if that's a way you want to look at it, and it forces everything else, including stage plan, into the subconscious. And it either manifests or is evident of confidence. This is going to be okay. This produces the feeling of, I'm not worried about the results. Remember, you shoot your best when you're not thinking, you don't care. So what he's figured out is a way to think less and not worry about the results, which duplicates this magical environment of not thinking and not caring. So going back to your suggestions here, I don't love all gas, no brake, depending on what that means for me. That could be problematic. See the line, feel the stroke. I have no idea what that means. That sounds like some 1980s rock video to me. that sounds like it sounds like some 80s rockers hitting the waffle dust pretty hard is what that sounds like. But hey, it doesn't matter what it means to me. It matters what it means to you. But for me personally, I like it to be something visual because that's what I want to be in control of. And when you learn to call your shots, that is the best occupation for the conscious mind I have ever found. And there's an interesting distinction there. I think that when you're really focused on calling your shots, you're occupying the conscious mind without conscious thought. The conscious mind is doing something. It's watching the gun go off, but it's not thinking. It would be like if you were riding in a car and you were transfixed by a beautiful sunset, right? There would be no thought in that. You'd be looking at this beautiful sunset. There would be zero thought, but you're 100% occupied by this sunset and you're not thinking about it. You're certainly not thinking about anything else. So when you learn to call your shots, deciding to do that is the best occupation for the conscious mind. That's what Joey Sauerland does. I'll try to do my Joey Sauerland voice or impersonation here. You know what I did, dog? Let me tell you what I did, dog. So what I did was I went to the stage, got it? Okay, so here I'm at the stage, and I'm going to do one thing first. I'm going to get a subconscious stage plan. That's the first thing I'm going to do, dog. And then once I get that subconscious stage plan, right? Oh, well, here's what I'm going to do, dog. I'm going to call my shots. I'm going to call every shot, dog. That's what I'm going to do. You'll have to get the Joey Sauerland impersonation straight from him. That's the best I can do on short notice. Okay, so we have a question about mental management. My match average is 50%. If I shoot better than that, I throw a mic or no shoot to move me back. Is changing your comfort zone a consequence of changing self-image, or are they two separate issues? Self-image provides the comfort zone. So what is happening to this shooter is if he finds himself doing better than 50%, self-image goes, hang on a second. We don't know what's happening here. This is not how we're accustomed to performing. Something's wrong. And the irony is the shooter's getting exactly what they want. They're better than 50%. But because self-image is not accustomed to that, it's also not okay with it. We don't do this. This is not something that happens to us. Something's wrong. And ideally, right, you would think the entirety of the athlete would be like, hey, this is great. We're doing better than normal. But that's not what self-image does. Self-image provides what is normal. And the letter from Billy illustrates that he has used imprints to his self-image to change what is normal. And I'm not sure where he was when he started. Let's just say he was middle of the pack, right? As he grows his self-image and he grows his skill, and he learns what to think about by controlling his conscious mind, his three circles, his triad state becomes balanced: conscious, subconscious, self-image, and then they all begin to grow. And as self-image grows, it begins to be okay with doing a little better. And then it becomes okay with being in the top third. And ultimately, it becomes okay being at the top. If you want to know what's different about the guys that dominate the sport, it's because their self-image has made that normal. Christian Sider is a phenomenal example of this. Joey Sauerland is another phenomenal example of this. Jay Beal, Gaz Evans, Rich Alloway, Billy Harrington. Right? These people have begun to stretch their self-image, so it's okay with winning. I know that seems crazy. Why would I need to make myself okay with winning? But if it's not normal, your self-image will fight it. Your self-image fights everything that's not normal. So what you've got to do is begin to stretch that self-image with imprints to it that say, hey, it's okay to do a little better. We've got this figured out. And that's, of course, what we can help you do in the entire mental management class. But yes, they are 100% related. And what's happening to you is when you're doing better than expected, self-image gets conflicted, issues a correction to put you back where you think you belong, where you finish where it is normal. And what we got to do is stretch the self-image Well, we also need to learn how to process-based performance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in the process of doing all this, self-image will begin to be okay with performing a little better. Okay, this next one is kind of long. Thus spoke my lovely bride. Okay, here we go. Hi, Steve. Love the podcast and the Insider program. I listen in the car, while at work, and at home. I have your voice literally pumping golden nuggets of info into my head all day. I've only been training for about 6 weeks. I discovered your program about a month ago. Using your methods, I achieved a consistent sub-second draw and reload in about a month. As soon as I tried your methods, I dropped 2/100ths off my draw on my first practice. This week during dry fire practice, I had a couple of shots in the .65 second range, which is about 2/10 to a quarter of a second faster than my average. Here's my first question. When I completed the super fast reps, it snapped me out of my subconscious mode. My conscious mind immediately shouted out, "Holy SHIT, what was that?" This makes it very hard for me to repeat it more than once. The frustrating part about this is that once I snap out of it, I can't remember what I did to achieve the faster time. I don't remember it at all. So I don't know if I did something sooner, or my hand speed miraculously increased, or if the time-space continuum temporarily warped in my bedroom. Should I just forget about the outliers and trust that I will start to see those more consistently with time and practice? Or is it worth it to try and chase those somehow, maybe with a camera, and figure out how to replicate it? Okay, so something like this is very interesting. When you have something like this happen out of the blue, I would just immediately do another rep. Standing there and thinking about it and wondering about it, I think does a couple of things. Number one, it's going to wake up the conscious mind. Number two, if it's vastly better than expected, self-image is going to freak out and go, that's not what we normally do. The easiest thing to do is go, look at that, a new normal. And then just do it again. It may or may not be the same as the previous outlier. But if you say, look at that, a new normal, what you're doing is you're imprinting to self-image that it's normal and okay to get the gun out in a 65. Not a big deal. We do this all the time. You know, Lanny likes to use the phrase, "it's like me to do things." I personally have never responded to that. Something about those words has always triggered something in me that says, if I got to tell myself it's like me to do something, then it must not be. Kind of like putting a sports car sticker on a sports car, right? If you've got a really nice car, let's say you've got a Ferrari, it doesn't need a bumper sticker that says sports car. So I prefer to say, this is normal. Look at this, a new normal. My self-image responds to that better than saying it's like me to do it. Because again, for me, if I got to say it's like me, that means it must not be. But if I say, look at that, a new normal, and then just do it again. You got a couple things happening here. You probably weren't thinking a whole lot when you did the rep, and that's great. That means it's pretty subconscious. The fact that you don't know how you did it is not a huge problem at first. That's why you just want to do it again. Do it again and again and again. So your question is, should I just forget about the outliers and trust I will start to see those more consistently? Yes. Is it worth it to try to chase those somehow, maybe with a camera, and try to figure out how to replicate it? So much of that depends on your personality. You probably did it by thinking, again, I don't know how you did it. It's very likely that you did it by really listening for the start tone. Listening for the start tone, you're doing stuff like that is so powerful because it occupies the conscious mind, as we discussed numerously ad nauseum previously. It occupies the conscious mind, transfers power to the subconscious, and it gives you a great reaction to the start tone. And anything you're trying to do in the sub-second range, gosh, that reaction time is so critical. There's 0.3 of a second of free time there. Okay? The next question might be a good podcast topic, ? I'm still a little confused as to when I should be pulling the trigger in dry fire and when I shouldn't. I know you don't pull the trigger in most of the drills until 6 reload 6, I think. He's correct about that. But when I'm in match mode or accuracy mode, I'm generally calling the shots as I press the trigger. I don't usually pull the trigger in speed mode because I'm still trying to feel what it's like to move faster. As long as I see the dot on the last target, I finish the rep. Is there a hard rule about when you should be pulling the trigger and not during dry fire? So let's start there. The reason we don't pull the trigger on the presentation drills is because we're trying to speed up the acquisition of an acceptable sight picture. These drills started out with me going to bowling pin matches. My very first ever dry fire drill was a presentation from low ready to a Xerox bowling pin. Because I learned that if I hit the first pin with the first shot, I won. If I didn't, I didn't. So, okay, I got to make this first shot. So I simply, down in my basement, I went from dry fire low ready to a perfect sight picture on a bowling pin. And I did it a little further than normal, so it'd be a little bit more difficult. That way, when I get to the match, it's a little easier. And I'm just working on acceptable sight picture. And the reason that we don't pull the trigger on the presentation drills is it's too easy to pull the trigger to beat the par time without seeing what you need to see. It's too easy to do that. You can drop the hammer on a 0.6 or a 0.7. Maybe you saw an acceptable sight picture, maybe you didn't, but that's the problem. We don't know. So that's why we don't pull the trigger on those drills, because we're trying to speed up the acceptable sight picture. And we start pulling the trigger on the multiple shot drills. And that's the way those drills were designed. The only damage you could do by pulling the trigger is if you are, this is such a fine line to discuss too. You've got to make pulling the trigger without an acceptable sight picture an isolated exercise. There is a lot of power in doing that to learn what it feels like to do something faster, but you need to know that's what you're doing. You need to very consciously say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger on this. Let's say a 6 reload 6. I've never done it under 4. I'm gonna do a 3-9 just to see what it feels like. Don't really care what I see. That's cool for a short period of time. The only damage you can do to your shooting is to take that cadence or that idea to the match. We talked about that on the last podcast. And the reasoning behind pulling the trigger or not pulling the trigger, again, in the presentation drills, you're trying to speed up the presence of an acceptable sight picture, not teach yourself to honk the trigger at 0.6. And there may be some value in doing it a different way. I'm just telling you where they came from and why that happens. Okay, so presentation drills, don't pull the trigger. Multiple shot drills, pull the trigger. And it does say in that book that the point of that book is not accuracy or fine trigger control. The book assumes that you can fire an accurate shot at 10 yards. And it also assumes that you want to do that a little quicker. All right, so it kind of assumes a decent match mode. Okay, hope I answered that question. Last question. I have discovered that I can switch my eye dominance. When shooting single-handed, I can use my right eye for strong hand only and my left eye during weak hand only. It seems to be about the same speed to an acquired acceptable sight picture using my left eye and weak hand as using my right eye and strong hand. But it is also just as fast to use my right eye with my weak hand. So clearly I cannot use the hand in front of me. But I knew you were going to do that. So clearly I cannot use the hand or the eye in front of you. A little Princess Bride reference there for you. About those of you that are over 40 are laughing, the rest of you are scratching your head. If you've not ever seen Princess Bride, it is probably the only movie that the entire family will enjoy. You're going to have to drag them into it, kicking and screaming, which is ironic given the way the film plays out. But Princess Bride, greatest family movie of all time. There may not be another family movie that's appropriate for everybody in the house except Princess Bride. So clearly, you cannot use the movie in front of you. Or maybe you could. Or should I just stick with using my right eye all the time? So cross dominance, something like, I've not studied these things a lot, so I don't know. Here's a medallia. Here's a medallia. There's something you need to see for every shot. And if you can see it with your right eye shooting right-handed, that's cool. If you can see it with your left eye shooting left-handed, that's cool too. I would want to do that in live fire to see if there's a difference. You may find one is more accurate than the other, or you may not. I would just say pick one and rep it out till it's subconscious so that you're not thinking about it. I haven't studied that. For me, I got to be careful here. If I stand up, the dogs will come in here. And we've had a very rare podcast with zero dog noise. I mean zero. Whether we'll get through this with zero dog noise, I can't say, but we're almost done. And for the first time, we've had zero dog noise. So if you're looking for a first Anderson podcast to listen to, this would be the one. If you don't like the dog noise, because we're currently at zero. Let's see. That's for sure right eye. That's also right eye. So I am right eye dominant with both hands. I shoot dot guns primarily, but it's the same with both of them. So it's totally up to you. I wouldn't worry a great deal about it. I would just do whichever one provides an acceptable sight picture. You mentioned they're about the same speed. I wouldn't worry about it. Okay. By the way, I'm also signed up for your mental management online course tomorrow night, and I'm very much looking forward to it. He sent me this a couple days ago, so it's almost like we're back to the future. Alex, thank you so much for the letter. Hope I answered that. The reason some of these answers are a little vague is it matters more why you're doing what you're doing than it matters what you are doing. If you've got a good reason for pulling the trigger that violates the way the drill is written, that's fine with me. If you've got a good reason for not pulling the trigger during the multiple shot drills, contrary to how the drill's written, that's fine with me. Those drills are written the way I've always done them, and they're written the way that I know works. And if you make a modification to it, it may or may not work better. It may or may not work at all. But the only way to damage your shooting is to not have a strong match mode to fall back on. It's the only way you could, quote unquote, damage your shooting. In fact, I met a guy in Georgia. Some of you know I had a rough time in Georgia. We're not going to get into that. But I met this guy, and he said, "Your first book is stupid. All it does is ruin people's shooting." Well, if you go through those drills and you don't get an acceptable sight picture, and you spend all your time in speed mode without having any kind of a match mode, yes. But the damage wasn't done by the drills. The damage was done by you not seeing what you needed to see for every shot you fired in competition. That's what did the damage. Okay? And I know that there's numerous warnings against that in that book. So you got to remember, when I wrote that book, I had just become a grandmaster, and I was a little afraid, to be perfectly honest with you, putting that information out there. I didn't know if it would work for everybody. All I knew was I made Grandmaster in 9 months using these drills, and people kept asking me how I did it, so I wrote a book. That's all that happened. And I do know that if you do those drills correctly, and you're constantly reducing your par times, you will be getting subconsciously faster. And you can put movement in there, you can do them while moving, you can mix them up however you would like to, but you need to know why you're doing it and what the definition of success is. And then the most important thing is to use those subconscious skills in competition in conjunction with a subconscious stage plan and a singular focus, combined with some level of confidence where you're not worried about the results, whatever that means. Should we go through that again? Let's do it again. Not worrying about the results can take one of 4 forms. Don't care. Pretty easy to do at an outlaw match or a different sport. It is what it is. That's another way you can not worry about the results. I'm going to do well. That's another great way to not worry about the results. I'm likely to win is another great way to not worry about the results. And the final one, which can't be faked, is I know I'm going to win. Those of you that are local hot dogs, when you get in your car, you know you're going to win that local match. And you also know that feeling can't be faked. That feeling happened over some period of time. You saw yourself climbing up, climbing up, climbing up, taking people out one at a time, and then 3 or 4 times in a row you won that sucker. And then you realized, hey, if I just show up, I'm going to win. And that's how self-image grows over time with those positive imprints. Hey, it's normal for me to be doing better. It's normal for me to be in the top third. It's normal for me to be nipping at the heels of the number one. Hey, I can win this thing. But that desire to win has got to go back to a process-based performance with a minimum of conscious thought, high level of subconscious skill, and a self-image that ultimately is not worried about the results, whatever form that takes. All right, hope you guys have enjoyed today's program. I got to take care of some other stuff before we do mental management tonight at 6 p.m. We'll probably schedule another mental management in January for the evening hours. We're starting to do a little bit of travel in January, so if there's a particular time frame that you'd like to see in January, please let me know via email, steve@andersonshooting.com. Otherwise, we'll do the standard 5 p or 6 p Eastern. That seems to be the most popular time slot. All right, folks, hope you've enjoyed today's program. It has been completely 100% dog noise free. So until we meet again on the range, on the Zoom, on the phone, or anywhere else, be like me, do what I do, say it with me. 1, 2, 3, get to work.